The room was a symphony of whispers, clicks, and hums, each sound betraying the tension that filled the air. Dr. Vortex, a towering alien with skin like shimmering glass and eyes that seemed to pierce dimensions, swept his gaze across the lecture hall. "Engineering is not about tools or technology," he said, his voice resonating with an otherworldly timbre. "It is about survival. And today, we separate the capable from the ordinary." The mixed species class of the Galactic Academy of Engineering Excellence, renowned across the galaxy as the Crucible of Genius, fell silent. Students from dozens of worlds shifted uneasily in their seats. Each one had heard of Dr. Vortex's infamous challenges, and none had dared underestimate the stakes. In the front row sat Alex Carter, the lone human in the room, slouched casually as though the professor's words were meant for someone else. Dr. Vortex activated a hologram with a flick of his clawed finger. The image of a barren wasteland materialized, a simulated environment riddled with jagged cliffs, searing winds, and violent storms. "Your task," he continued, "is to build a fully functional shelter capable of withstanding these conditions. You will use only the materials provided within the simulation. You have 1 hour." Murmurs broke out. Some students began strategizing in their native languages, while others eyed their competitors with barely concealed disdain. Alex yawned, drawing a disapproving glare from a three-eyed student nearby. Earthlings, with their crude tools and lack of innate advantages, had a reputation for being woefully outclassed in competitions like these. Yet Alex remained unfazed. Dr. Vortex, observing the human's indifference, raised an eyebrow ridge. "Do you find this challenge beneath you, Carter?" he asked, his voice cutting through the whispers like a blade. Alex sat up, offering a lazy grin. "Not at all, Professor. Just waiting for you to say go." A ripple of laughter spread through the room, though it was tinged with mockery. The idea that a human could outperform species with natural biomechanical abilities or advanced neural enhancements was laughable. Dr. Vortex ignored the laughter, his gaze locked on Alex. "Then you'll have your chance to prove yourself," he said coldly. "Begin." The room plunged into chaos as students scrambled to their workstations. Holographic interfaces flared to life, and alien students activated tools ranging from molecular fabricators to plasma sculptors. The Krivarn student used its tentacles to weave metallic fibers with surgical precision, while Alevix hovered, constructing an energy lattice with its psionic abilities. Each species played to its strengths, their advanced techniques a testament to centuries of technological evolution. Alex, however, approached the simulation station with a simplicity that bordered on audacity. He bypassed the array of tools and instead scanned the holographic wasteland with a practiced eye. Rocks, vines, and sand, basic materials that seemed laughable compared to the intricate machinery others were deploying. Ignoring the skeptical glances, Alex grabbed a simple multi-tool from his belt, a relic by galactic standards, and began to work. Dr. Vortex observed silently, his multifaceted eyes tracking Alex's every move. The human's approach was unorthodox, almost primitive, yet there was a fluidity to his actions that hinted at something deeper. An understanding of fundamentals often overlooked in the galaxy's obsession with complexity. "Primitive," scoffed a student with shimmering scales, her shelter already resembling a crystalline dome. "Typical human arrogance." Alex didn't respond. Instead, he tied two vines together, anchoring them with strategically placed rocks. Each movement was deliberate, each choice dictated by the environment itself. The result wasn't flashy, but there was a raw elegance to the structure taking shape under his hands. 15 minutes passed. The first completed shelter wasn't from the Levix or the Krivarn. It wasn't from the crystalline student or the psionically gifted. It was Alex's, a compact, sturdy design that seemed to defy the simulated wasteland's hostility. Dr. Vortex leaned forward, his interest piqued. "Carter," he said, his voice softer but no less commanding, "you're finished already?" Alex wiped his hands on his pants, glancing at the timer that still had 45 minutes left. "Yeah. What's next?" The room fell silent, every student staring at the human with a mixture of disbelief and irritation. Dr. Vortex's lips curled into what might have been a smile or a challenge. Let's see if it works, he said, activating the shelter's first test, the simulated storm. As winds howled and rain lashed the simulated structure, Alex's shelter stood firm, its design holding against conditions that had already begun to test the limits of his classmates' efforts. Dr. Vortex folded his arms. Interesting, he muttered, his gaze fixed on Alex. Very interesting. In the silence that followed, Alex leaned back, watching his shelter withstand what the galaxy believed a human couldn't handle. Primitive, huh, he muttered under his breath, grinning as he saw the disbelief in his classmates' faces. The real test, however, was only beginning. The simulated environment roared to life, immersing the class in a wasteland of shifting sands, jagged cliffs, and searing winds. Holographic suns blazed overhead, casting an oppressive heat that was almost tangible. Alien students worked furiously, their species-specific talents and advanced tools on full display. Crixer, a towering Krivarn with tentacles tipped in razor-sharp claws, manipulated beams of holographic metal like threads of silk. His 8 limbs worked in a mesmerizing dance, twisting and binding the materials into a skeletal frame. Structural integrity is paramount, he rumbled to no one in particular, his voice deep and resonant. Humans wouldn't understand. Nearby, Velria, a Levix with translucent skin and a crown of bioluminescent spines, hovered a few feet off the ground. Her species' psionic abilities allowed her to shape energy fields into tangible constructs. With graceful movements, she sculpted a dome of glowing plasma, its surface rippling like liquid light. Efficiency is key, she said with a smug glance toward Alex's workstation. A brute force approach will always fail. Alex Carter, the lone human, remained conspicuously silent. While his classmates deployed cutting-edge technology and species-specific techniques, Alex worked with an almost alarming calm. His shelter, though unassuming, was nearly complete, a simple structure of rocks, vines, and sand, reinforced with an earthen roof. It looked primitive compared to the gleaming domes and intricate frameworks around him, but Alex moved with the confidence of someone who understood the fundamentals of survival. Velria paused her work to watch him, her spines flickering in confusion. What is he doing? That doesn't even qualify as engineering. Crixer snorted, his tentacles flexing as he twisted a final beam into place. Humans are simple creatures. They think small because they are small. The professor, Dr. Vortex, wandered through the simulated environment, his glass-like skin reflecting the harsh light. He stopped briefly at each workstation, offering critiques in his usual cutting tone. When he reached Alex's station, he lingered, studying the human's shelter with a frown. Carter, he said, his voice carrying over the cacophony of construction. Explain your approach. Alex didn't look up, his hands deftly tying a final vine into place. Survival's about working with what you've got. Doesn't matter how advanced your tools are if you don't understand the environment. Rocks and vines are here, I used rocks and vines. Simple. Dr. Vortex tilted his head, his multifaceted eyes narrowing. And yet simplicity is often mistaken for inadequacy. Are you confident this will endure the trials? Alex grinned, leaning back to inspect his work. We'll find out, won't we? As the timer ticked down, the alien students began finalizing their shelters. Each structure was a marvel of alien ingenuity, towering domes, energy fields, and gravity-defying designs that seemed to defy the very laws of physics. The students exchanged smug glances, their confidence bolstered by their technological prowess. But then the first test began. The simulation launched a ferocious windstorm, its gusts howling as sand and debris lashed the shelters. Crixer's metallic framework groaned under the strain, a critical joint snapping with a deafening crack. Velria's plasma dome flickered as the energy field struggled to maintain cohesion. One by one, the advanced shelters began to falter, their designs overwhelmed by the sheer brutality of the simulated environment. Only Alex's shelter stood firm. Dr. Vortex watched in silence, his expression unreadable. The alien students stared in disbelief as the winds died down, revealing the wreckage of their efforts. In stark contrast, Alex's shelter remained intact, a humble but undeniably effective design that had withstood what their advanced technologies could not. Impossible, Velria muttered, her voice tinged with disbelief. How could something so crude succeed where we failed? Alex shrugged, brushing sand off his hands. It's not about looking impressive. It's about doing the job. Dr. Vorthax stepped forward, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. Carter, your shelter is the only one to pass the first test. This raises an important question. Is simplicity truly the key to survival, or was this a fluke? Alex met his gaze without hesitation. Test it again if you want. I'm not worried. The professor's lips curved into what might have been a smile. Very well. Let's see how your simplicity holds up against the next challenge. The students groaned, frustration giving way to determination as the simulation reset. Alex, however, leaned casually against his shelter, his confidence unwavering. For the first time, the Galactic Academy of Engineering Excellence faced a truth they weren't ready to accept. Perhaps the most advanced mind in the room didn't rely on technology at all. The second test began without warning, the simulated environment shifting into an even harsher iteration of itself. The holographic suns dimmed, and a chilling wind swept across the wasteland, carrying with it sheets of acid rain. The ground beneath the students' feet began to tremble as the simulation introduced tectonic instability. It was chaos incarnate, designed to push even the most advanced designs to their breaking point. Alex Carter stood by his unassuming shelter, arms crossed, as the acid rain began to fall. Droplets sizzled on the surfaces of the alien shelters, eating away at plasma constructs and corroding metal beams. The students scrambled to activate defensive mechanisms and patch weaknesses in their designs. Velria's glowing dome began to fracture under the dual assault of corrosive rain and seismic vibrations. Her psionic energy flared as she struggled to maintain cohesion. Why is this happening? Velria shouted, panic edging her voice as the once glorious dome began to collapse inward. Dr. Vorthax observed from a distance, his expression unreadable. Your design relies too heavily on maintaining a single energy field, he remarked. A fatal flaw under sustained environmental stress. Meanwhile, Alex's shelter, built from local materials, seemed immune to the storm's fury. The rain slicked off the angled roof, the tightly bound vines repelling moisture instead of absorbing it. The tremors rattled the structure, but the carefully chosen stones at its base absorbed the vibrations, keeping the shelter stable. Alex watched as his classmates' shelters faltered one by one, their intricate designs failing to account for the relentless unpredictability of the simulated environment. Crixer's tentacles worked frantically, trying to reinforce his metallic framework. This is absurd, he bellowed, his deep voice echoing over the chaos. How can that, he gestured angrily toward Alex's shelter, outlast the best engineering the galaxy has to offer? Alex didn't look up from where he was sharpening a stick with his multi-tool. Maybe the galaxy's been overthinking things, he said casually. Crixer glared, but another tremor shook the ground, forcing him to abandon his argument and focus on his crumbling structure. Across the simulation, students shouted in frustration as their shelters failed one by one. Dr. Vorthax, for the first time, seemed genuinely intrigued. He strode toward Alex's shelter, ignoring the acidic rain sizzling on his shimmering skin. Carter, he said, his voice low but commanding. Explain your design in detail. Alex stood, brushing the dust off his pants. It's simple, really. I used the environment against itself. The slanted roof channels the rain away, and the stones absorb the vibrations. Vines are naturally resistant to weathering if you weave them right. It's nothing fancy, just common sense if you've spent enough time on Earth. Dr. Vorthax's multifaceted eyes gleamed. Common sense, you say? It appears that what your species considers common is something the rest of the galaxy has forgotten in its pursuit of complexity. The professor gestured toward the remains of Velria's glowing dome. The Leviks rely on their psionics to solve every problem. Crixer's species prides itself on brute structural force. Both approaches failed because they relied on singular strengths, ignoring adaptability. Velria, now drenched and visibly shaken, glared at Alex. So what are you saying? That his primitive approach is better than our advanced technology? Dr. Vorthax turned to her, his tone sharp. I am saying that technology is a tool, not a crutch. Carter succeeded because he adapted to the conditions rather than imposing a preconceived solution onto an unpredictable problem. The students fell silent, the weight of the professor's words sinking in. For the first time, Alex felt the weight of their stares, no longer mocking, but curious. He could see the wheels turning in their minds as they began to reassess everything they thought they knew about engineering and problem solving. Dr. Vorthak straightened, his voice cutting through the quiet. The lesson here is clear. Ingenuity is not defined by the sophistication of one's tools, but by the ability to think critically and adapt. Carter, you've demonstrated this better than I could have imagined. Alex gave a small shrug, trying to downplay the moment. It's just a shelter. The professor's lips curled into a faint smile. Perhaps. But the principles you've displayed here extend far beyond this simulation. And now, I am curious to see how far this human touch can take you. As the simulated environment reset, the alien students began to approach Alex hesitantly, their pride warring with a newfound respect. One by one, they started asking questions, eager to understand the principles behind his success. For the first time in his life, Alex found himself in the unexpected position of being a teacher. And as he began to explain his methods, he realized that this was only the beginning of a much larger lesson for everyone. The simulation had been reset, the wasteland returning to its original barren state. Despite the brief reprieve, the atmosphere in the lecture hall remained charged. The students, bruised by the failure of their advanced designs, cast furtive glances at Alex Carter as he calmly tinkered with his multi-tool. For the first time, the room wasn't filled with ridicule or dismissive stares. Curiosity had taken hold. Dr. Vorthax addressed the class, his crystalline voice cutting through the tension. The first 2 tests revealed a critical flaw in your approaches. Many of you relied on technological prowess or innate abilities without fully understanding the environment. Carter's success, while surprising, highlights a fundamental principle of engineering: adaptation. Let's see if you can learn from it. The professor gestured toward the simulation. For this exercise, you will work in pairs. Carter, you will assist Crixer. Together, you will improve his design. Crixer stiffened, his tentacles curling in irritation. Professor, with respect, I don't require assistance from a human? Dr. Vorthax interrupted, his multifaceted eyes narrowing. Your design failed. You require assistance. The question is whether you are capable of learning from someone you consider inferior. The room fell silent. Crixer's tentacles flexed as he wrestled with his pride. Finally, he grunted, "Fine. Let's get this over with." Alex, unfazed, walked over to Crixer's station. "Don't worry, big guy," he said with a grin. "This'll be fun." The timer began, and the room erupted into activity once more. Alex studied Crixer's design, a metallic framework reinforced with interlocking beams. It was an impressive structure, designed to resist physical force, but it lacked flexibility and adaptability. The failure in the previous tests was glaringly obvious. "Your problem," Alex began, "is that your structure's too rigid. When the ground shifted, it had nowhere to go but down." Crixer bristled. "Rigid structures are a hallmark of Krivarn engineering. Strength is stability. Strength is useless if it can't bend when needed," Alex countered. He grabbed a nearby holographic interface and sketched out a modification. "See this? If we add a flexible joint here and here, the structure can absorb shock instead of snapping." Crixer's tentacles hovered over the design, his expression skeptical. "This could work. But it seems simplistic." "Simple doesn't mean ineffective," Alex said, clapping him on the back. "Let's test it out." They worked together, Alex guiding Crixer through the adjustments. Crixer's tentacles moved with mechanical precision, welding joints and reinforcing weak points. For every skeptical remark, Alex countered with practical explanations, his experience with Earth's harsh environments shining through. Slowly, the Krivarn's disdain gave way to grudging respect. Across the room, other students watched the unlikely duo with a mix of fascination and disbelief. Velria, still stinging from her earlier failure, muttered under her breath, "How does he make it look so easy?" As the timer ticked down, Crixer's modified shelter stood ready. It retained the imposing strength of his original design but now incorporated the flexible joints and adaptive features Alex had suggested. The final test began, a combination of all previous environmental hazards. Acid rain, violent winds, seismic tremors, and extreme temperature fluctuations ravaged the simulated wasteland. One by one, the alien-designed shelters began to crumble under the relentless onslaught. Crixer's shelter, however, stood firm. The flexible joints absorbed the seismic vibrations, while the reinforced roof diverted the acid rain. For the first time, a Krivarn design had not only survived but thrived under conditions designed to break it. Crixer stared at the simulation, his tentacles slack with disbelief. "It worked," he muttered. "Your adjustments worked." Alex grinned. "Told you." Sometimes, all it takes is a little human ingenuity. Dr. Vorthax approached, his gaze lingering on the shelter. "Impressive. The integration of flexibility into a traditionally rigid design is a paradigm shift for Krivarn engineering." He turned to Crixer. "Would you have considered such an approach on your own?" Crixer hesitated, then shook his head. "No. I wouldn't have." The professor nodded, then turned to the rest of the class. "Let this be a lesson to all of you. True engineering is not about clinging to tradition or over-reliance on technology. It is about understanding the problem and crafting a solution, no matter how unconventional it may seem." The room was silent, the weight of his words sinking in. For the first time, Alex felt a shift in the way the alien students looked at him. The skepticism and ridicule were gone, replaced by something far more significant: respect. As the simulation ended, Crixer extended a tentacle toward Alex. "You have my thanks, human. Perhaps there is more to your species than I thought." Alex shook the tentacle with a grin. "No hard feelings, big guy. Just remember, sometimes simple works better." Dr. Vorthax observed the exchange, a rare smile ghosting across his face. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of hope for the future of the Galactic Academy. The simulated wasteland faded, leaving the lecture hall quiet save for the hum of the holographic projectors. Dr. Vorthax, standing at the center of the room, surveyed his students with an expression that was equal parts scrutiny and curiosity. "You've seen failure," he began, his resonant voice filling the space. "You've witnessed success. Now, you will learn to bridge the gap." He gestured toward Alex Carter, who stood near his completed shelter, arms crossed casually. "Carter's methods have demonstrated a principle many of you have ignored: adaptability. Today's exercise will focus on integrating those principles into your designs." Carter will lead the session. The room erupted into murmurs. Alien students exchanged looks of disbelief and indignation. Velria, her translucent spines flickering with agitation, spoke first. "With respect, Professor, how can a human, a species known for its lack of advanced technology, teach anything to the brightest minds in the galaxy?" Dr. Vorthax's gaze locked onto her, his tone sharp. "Because he succeeded where you failed. And if you are as bright as you claim, you'll learn from him." Velria's bioluminescent spines dimmed, her argument silenced. Alex, suppressing a smirk, stepped forward. "All right, let's get started. This isn't about who's better, this is about making sure all of you can adapt when it counts." The students divided into small groups, each tasked with redesigning their shelters using Alex's principles of simplicity, resourcefulness, and adaptability. Alex circulated the room, offering guidance. At first, his suggestions were met with skepticism. "You want me to replace a plasma shield with rocks?" Velria asked, her voice laced with incredulity. "Not replace, supplement," Alex corrected. "Your plasma shield is great for short bursts, but it drains energy too fast under sustained pressure. Layering it with physical barriers gives you endurance. Think of it like wearing armor under a force field." She hesitated, then begrudgingly followed his advice. Nearby, Alex stopped at a station where a student with insect-like features struggled with a complex energy lattice. Looks fancy, Alex said, inspecting the intricate design. But what happens when the power runs out? The student's antennae twitched. It collapses. Exactly. Add some support beams. They don't need power, and they'll keep your structure standing if the energy field fails. Bit by bit, the students began to adopt Alex's approach. The room buzzed with activity as advanced technologies were tempered with practical solutions. Alex moved from group to group, demonstrating techniques, answering questions, and offering encouragement. Slowly, the skepticism in the room began to give way to curiosity and respect. Dr. Vorthax observed from a distance, his sharp eyes taking in the transformation. He approached Alex during a brief lull. "You've managed to achieve what many instructors have failed to do, engage their pride without crushing it." Alex shrugged, wiping his hands on his pants. "They're not bad students. They just needed a different perspective. Sometimes, the simplest solutions are the hardest to see when you're used to complexity." The professor nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Perspective is a rare commodity. Your methods are unconventional, but effective. Perhaps there is more to Earth than the galaxy has given it credit for." As the session continued, the students began to surprise even themselves. Krixer's reinforced shelter, now incorporating Alex's flexible joints, performed flawlessly in a series of stress tests. Velria's hybrid dome, bolstered by physical barriers, maintained integrity through sustained assaults. Even the insectoid student's energy lattice, simplified and reinforced, proved to be remarkably resilient. By the end of the exercise, the lecture hall was filled with completed shelters that were stronger, more adaptable, and far more practical than before. The students, once dismissive of Alex's methods, now looked to him with genuine respect. Dr. Vorthax called for attention, his voice cutting through the chatter. "You've learned today that ingenuity is not the sole province of the advanced. Sometimes, the most effective solutions are born of necessity and experience. Carter has provided you with tools far more valuable than technology, the ability to adapt and think critically. Remember this lesson." He turned to Alex, his tone softening. "You've exceeded my expectations, Carter. Perhaps Earth has more to offer the galaxy than we imagined." Alex grinned, rubbing the back of his neck. "Just doing my part, Professor." As the students filed out, chatting animatedly about their newfound insights, Velria approached Alex. Her spines glowed faintly, a sign of humility. "Carter," she said hesitantly. "Your methods, they were effective. Thank you for your guidance." Alex extended a hand, smiling. "Call me Alex. And don't mention it. You're all smarter than you give yourselves credit for, just gotta think outside the box sometimes." Velria hesitated, then shook his hand. "Perhaps there's more to humans than I thought." As the lecture hall emptied, Dr. Vorthax watched Alex with a rare glimmer of approval. The human had not only passed the challenge, but had taught his peers a lesson they would carry for the rest of their careers. For the first time in years, the professor felt a spark of hope, not just for his students, but for the future of galactic engineering itself. The lecture hall buzzed with energy, the air charged with a rare camaraderie born from shared learning and newfound respect. For the first time, the alien students weren't divided by species or technological superiority but were united by a simple truth: adaptability trumped arrogance. Alex Carter stood at the center of this transformation, his unassuming demeanor masking the profound impact he'd had. But the real test was yet to come. As Dr. Vorthax prepared to dismiss the class, the emergency sirens blared. The holographic projectors shut down abruptly, replaced by red warning lights flashing across the room. A mechanical voice echoed through the hall: "Emergency alert. Meteor storm detected. Impact imminent. All personnel are advised to evacuate to secure zones." Chaos erupted as students scrambled for their belongings. Dr. Vorthax raised his voice, cutting through the noise. "Calm yourselves. This is not a drill. We must proceed to the Academy's shelter immediately." Alex, however, froze, his instincts honed by years of survival training kicking in. "Wait," he said, his voice firm. If the meteor storms close enough to trigger an alert, there's no way we'll make it to the shelter in time. Dr. Vorthax turned, his multifaceted eyes narrowing. Explain. Alex pointed to a nearby display showing the storm's trajectory. Look at the projected impact radius. The Academy's shelter is underground, but it's not designed for a direct hit. If we don't reinforce it, or find another solution, we're toast. The students stared, their panic giving way to confusion. Crixer, his tentacles twitching anxiously, asked, "What do you suggest, human?" Alex's mind raced as he glanced around the hall, taking stock of their surroundings. "We've got materials here, projectors, shielding components, and plenty of students who just proved they're capable of building under pressure. If we work together, we can construct a secondary barrier in time." Dr. Vorthax hesitated, weighing the risks. Finally, he nodded. "Do as he says. Your survival depends on it." The hall transformed into a hive of activity. Under Alex's direction, the students dismantled and used equipment and scavenged materials. Crixer and his Krivarn strength focused on bending and securing metal beams, while Velria's psionics were used to fuse components with precision. The insectoid student, now invigorated by his earlier success, coordinated energy field generators to create a temporary shield. Alex moved between groups, delegating tasks and offering quick adjustments. Crixer angled that beam to distribute the force. Velria double-checked the field density, it needs to hold against debris. And someone reinforced the ceiling supports before they cave in. The students worked with an urgency they'd never felt before, their competitive rivalries replaced by a shared goal. Dr. Vorthax watched from the sidelines, his expression inscrutable. This was no longer just a test of engineering, it was a trial of character and leadership. The first meteor hit with a deafening crash, shaking the hall. Dust and debris rained down, but the hastily constructed barrier held. Alex shouted over the noise, "Brace for impact. Everyone, stay behind the supports." More meteors followed, each strike testing the limits of their design. The energy field generators flickered under the strain, but Velria and her group adjusted in real time, maintaining stability. Crixer's reinforced beams groaned but refused to buckle, the flexible joints absorbing the shock. Despite the chaos, the students held their ground, working together with a cohesion that defied their earlier divisions. Each impact was met with quick adjustments, Alex's voice guiding them like a lifeline. "Don't panic. Focus on the structure. Trust the design." When the storm finally passed, the hall was eerily silent. The barrier, battered but intact, stood as a testament to their ingenuity and teamwork. The students, covered in dust and sweat, stared at it in disbelief. Dr. Vorthax stepped forward, his crystalline skin reflecting the faint glow of the emergency lights. "You've done more than survive," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "You've proven that unity and adaptability can overcome even the most insurmountable challenges." He turned to Alex, his gaze uncharacteristically warm. "Carter, your leadership and resourcefulness have not only saved lives, but have taught a lesson no simulation could replicate. You've shown this academy, and perhaps the galaxy, that humanity has much to offer." Alex, exhausted but grinning, shrugged. "Guess we Earthlings have a knack for thinking on our feet." The students erupted into cheers, their earlier doubts about the human replaced by admiration. Crixer extended a tentacle toward Alex. "You've earned my respect, Carter. If you ever visit Krivarn, the drinks are on me." Velria, her spines glowing softly, added, "And if you ever find yourself in Levik's space, you will be an honored guest." As the academy staff began repairs, Dr. Vorthax approached Alex one last time. "You've done more than pass a challenge, Carter. You've sparked a change in perspective. This academy will never look at Earth, or humans, the same way again." Alex smiled, glancing at the students who now treated him as one of their own. "Good. But let's hope the next lesson doesn't involve dodging meteors." Dr. Vorthax allowed himself a rare chuckle. "Indeed. Though knowing you, Carter, I suspect you'd find a way to turn even that into an opportunity." As the hall returned to normal, Alex couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. In one day, He had gone from an underestimated human to a symbol of resilience and ingenuity. The galaxy might be vast and filled with advanced civilizations, but if today proved anything, it was that humans had a place among them, one they could carve with nothing more than grit, ingenuity, and a bit of luck.